Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ryan with From Corners Unknown. I'm joined with my co-hosts Connor and Graham Williams, and this is our fourth episode of Celluloid Obscurities, where we muse about old, obscure, relatively forgotten films. And in this episode, we are going to talk about the 1946 movie titled The Spiral Staircase, directed by Robert Siodmak. So that is the film we're talking about today, and Graham recommended this one to us. Do you have any history with this, Graham? Like, how'd you stumble upon this film, and what compelled you to want to talk about it?
Well, this is another one of those films that I saw when I was probably 12 or 13, and this always stuck with me, even though I was fairly young when I saw it, and obviously didn't completely understand all of the aspects of it then, but visually it is really why I picked this one, again, because of the incredible use of lighting, and also from the soundtrack side of things, it's, I think, the third film to really make use of the theremin.
Yes.
So I thought it'd be a nice, interesting one, obviously with Connor's insights into the actual physicality of setting up these shots.
Right.
And it's also, to my mind, one of the best examples of really decent film noir.
Yeah, so this is the first film in English we're discussing. I guess I should put this out there that this is a spoiler discussion. We're going to ruin the hell out of this. We're going to give away the plot and kind of the twists and turns it takes. And this is kind of a noir murder mystery sort of film. So if you don't want the ending spoiled or kind of the surprise spoiled, feel free to go check this movie out, and if you want to listen to us talk about it, go see it, and you can come back and listen after you've experienced it for yourself. Yeah, let's get a bit of a synopsis here so folks know what it's about, and yeah, just kind of describe it.
As Ryan said, this is essentially a film noir murder mystery film set approximately about 1930, given that right at the start of the film some of the characters are watching a silent film, which is actually The Kiss, which starred Greta Garbo, and that came out in 1929. As I say, essentially it's a murder mystery with these victims all have something that sets them apart from what the murderer would call normal people.
Right.
And yeah, set in a very small community, and it seems to be a community where it is always night, it's always raining, and there's always lots of thunder and lightning, which adds some brilliant lighting effects. But that's one thing I noticed. I don't think it stops raining throughout the entire film.
Yeah, except for the very beginning, the ladies at the film, or like she's at the movie and the lady's playing the piano along with that silent film, and then she starts to go home and gets taken on that horse-drawn carriage out to the abode that she works at, and it's not raining then, but then as soon as there's this weird time of day change when she's kind of walking through the woods, and there's kind of there's like that little scary moment, like you think it could just be kind of one of those traditional tension building moments. It is, and she kind of picks up a stick to defend herself, and she sees that it's a rabbit, and she kind of is just like, oh, it's not a big deal, she kind of relaxes, and then she just walks. I mean, she can't be that far, and then within the next frame or the next scene it's pouring rain, and it's pitch black. I was like, well, it was just daylight, just 30 seconds ago. What happened? It's kind of a weird hard cut, but maybe it was intentional. But I thought that was a little strange how it kind of did. It was such an abrupt change in, day to evening, clear and nice, to hard rain and lightning.
Indeed, and for all we know, there may have been a transitional scene that ended up on the cutting room floor, which obviously these days would be an extra on the DVD, but 1945 that would have just been swept away and chucked out.
That's a good point.
So maybe, but as you say, apart from that very first bit, as soon as she gets to the house, it seems to be this perpetual nighttime thunderstorm, rain.
Yeah,
I know they foreshadowed it in the theater at the hotel when the girl opens up the window, and you could hear like the storm starting in the distance.
Oh, there you go.
Before,
okay, that's a good connection.
Tension-filled music of the murderer's eyes shown.
Yeah, it's actually the director's eye.
I picked that up. I read that little snippet.
And predates Peeping Tom, about the
Okay.
Very same thing as stalkers spying on girls and killing them. And I thought there's the kind of setting the film up very clever, the way when we see the populace of the village watching the silent film, and you've got the pianist, and there's a little bit of Chopin, and then some of that more typical silent film style piano music, and then it goes into Beethoven, and then the actual soundtrack picks up, and Beethoven runs through that first murder scene with the girl with the limp, but becomes part of the soundtrack, and it's very clever, and I've not seen it earlier than this way of embedding the soundtrack into the film.
Sure.
A beautiful little transition through the music, and then some of the motifs from the Beethoven sonata crop up again and again through the film.
Interesting. Kind of like that little melodic bit where the doctor who takes the mute woman, I think her name is Helen in the film, he kind of whistles the tune and it kind of plays after he starts whistling it or whatever, and like that little bit seems to poetically come back. Parts of the soundtrack seem to pair specifically with certain characters, and that little leitmotif seems to pair with Helen as she's having a small moment of happiness, almost like a theme song, as you say.
And for me, always the mark of a composer who knows how to compose a soundtrack. This particular one was done by Roy Webb, and whilst it's not a unique soundtrack, you can tell by the way he's using these leitmotifs that he's a very experienced composer for film music and able to do that. So it shows Roy Webb's long-standing. I mean, I think he did over 200 scores.
Yeah, I got 265. I was just like, wow.
There you go, nearly
on IMDb. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
incredible.
That was pretty amazing.
And so I think doing that many, you're going to pick up a few little nuanced tricks of the trade, aren't you? But it comes through as well, I think, because the soundtrack doesn't really overbear the film at any point.
No, it accentuates it very nicely, and there are plenty of moments where it's just kind of, just dialogue with nothing like no music kind of playing in the background. It's used sparingly, and when it does come in, it definitely heightens certain aspects of the film. And even the director, Robert Siodmak, he has a lot of director credits too. He has like 62 director credits, at least per IMDb, and so I mean, he has quite a few.
The
films.
cinematographer was over 200 also. I'm just like, geez.
Oh wow!
Back then, they really just like cranked them out.
They just cranked them out.
I guess there wasn't as much competition back then too, though. So.
Right. And I guess we could also know this film is also inspired by a novel titled Some Must Watch, which was written by Miss Ethel Lena White. It seems like that this film, I don't know if it's like a direct adaptation, I haven't read it, but it seems like it definitely draws heavily from it. And I think, I guess another interesting tidbit before we start diving into the movie a bit more, I mean, we've already touched on some aspects of it, but I thought it was kind of cool to see back in 1947, one of the supporting actress, Ethel Barrymore, she got an Oscar nod or whatever. She just got a nomination for her role. I think that the dynamic between Mrs. Warren, she's kind of like bedridden. I don't actually know why she was bedridden, but basically throughout the entire film, she's sick and she's being taken care of by a handful of maids in this home. And I think my favorite aspect of this film specifically is the dynamic between Mrs. Warren and then the mute lady Helen, like kind of their interactions. Miss Warren seems to be a bit of a curmudgeon in some sense, but she's also kind of loving and endearing, and she cares about Helen a lot, and she's trying to get her to leave the house throughout the duration of the film because she knows something is bad's about to happen. But I think that that's like my favorite aspect, just kind of their character interactions. There's a lot of like little subtle things, and I think I really enjoyed Dorothy McGuire, Helen's performance, just because she's quiet most of the film, but she accents her face so well throughout and just articulates her feelings and her emotions so well, just with these just like little facial touches. Like, I don't know, just the way she smiles or she kind of looks curious at certain things. I really loved her role. I really appreciated all the subtlety she brought to that role.
Yeah, that's it. I think you do have to watch it a few times to actually pick up on it, and As you say, Ethel Barrymore, one of the most enjoyable parts of the film is just her sheer cantankerousness.
Yes.
When she's dealing with the nurse, juxtaposed with how gentle and caring she is with Helen, whose roles are a little ambiguous. You don't really ever pick up exactly what her role in the house is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think she's there as a sort of companion, somebody there for the sake of company. And
I like how she was bedridden and like physically weak, but they made her like mentally such a strong character. Like her whole little part where she's talking about how she killed the tiger at the beginning.
Yeah, she even has like that nice line too where she was talking to Dr. Perry, kind of the younger doctor who's competing with the older doctor in the same city. Yeah. And she talks about like how, you know, she's like the second wife, she was the second wife to her husband, and how she was not nearly, she said something to the effect of like she's not nearly as good looking, but she was a much better shot, you know, just to, you know, shooting a gun or a rifle. Yeah, there are a lot of like cute or like really cool little moments and lines she has that really brings her character to life, even though she doesn't physically move around almost at all throughout the film. She definitely is one of the most active and interesting characters in the film, I would say.
That's right. It's almost as if every other character in the film orbits around her, such as her gravitas.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Like you say, she never leaves that room apart from right at the very end of the film. But she controls that house and that household and everything that goes on in there. And
exactly.
As you say, you mentioned Dr. Parry, played by Kent Smith. When you look at the cast list, and they've got such solid, established actors and actresses all playing.
Right.
And I suppose these days it'd be called an ensemble cast, wouldn't it? Or in musical terms, a supergroup.
Yeah, everybody in this film is pretty goddamn good. Like, they're pretty remarkable. And I was like, man, I wish I kind of grew up in this era, like had a better semblance of like how well established these people were, because they definitely seem to be on their game in this movie.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and some of them, I mean, even James Bell, who plays the, for me, slightly suspicious police constable.
Yeah, he's suspicious, but I also feel like he's just kind of simple-minded. I don't know, maybe I'm... Yeah.
You never work out whether that's an act, or whether he's just a sort of simple country copper, or whether there is that little undercurrent. He knows very well what he's doing, but he's pretending to be a slightly simple country copper, so people don't know what he's really about. Yeah.
He had that one remark when this is early on in the film, when he goes to the estate and he talks to Steve Warren, the younger brother of Professor Warren, who kind of owns the mansion. Yeah, he kind of just makes an off remark, like he's like, "Oh yeah, you just came back from France. You must have. There are a lot of beautiful women there." And he was just kind of like almost trying to get, get these these weird details. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been married since I was 16." Like he said it almost like he just made a bad decision. And he wished he could just kind of be like more promiscuous. And I was like, that was a weird remark. Yeah, I was like, that was a strange remark. Like, and I don't know how that was supposed to paint him, but
I feel like they made a lot of characters say things kind of like that against women, or whatever, just to make them a suspect.
Yeah,
the audience think like, oh, this could be the killer also. But
plenty of red herrings throughout, and I mean, even the casting of George Brett, who plays Professor Warren. At the time, he was known for being the leading man in many, many Bette Davis films, where he was always the hero, and it's boxing the audience because they're used to George Brent being the good guy. So of all of the male characters, he's the one probably at the time the fewest people had any suspicions of.
Interesting. See, and that's something I would never pick up on had I, with the context you just gave me. That adds a pretty, like, a bit of a more meta layer to it as well. Like somebody that you kind of expect to be kind of like the one who's always comes out on top, and then he actually ends up being the seedy underbelly of the entire thing.
Exactly.
What's funny to me is that like, I've seen a lot of these actors in other films and stuff. Like, I recognize their faces and names, but since they aren't in like today's media and seeing them all over the news and on social media and whatnot, they're like, they don't stick with me. I'm thinking like maybe 20 years from now, nobody will really make a connection to Brad Pitt or something weird like that.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see how it pans out, and it also shines a bit of a historic light on how Hollywood ran at the time as well. As I say, with George Brent and Bette Davis, they were both contracted to a particular studio to make a certain amount of films, whereas these days it's much more fluid, isn't it? And
yeah,
whereas then it was much more rigid. You were signed to Universal, that was it. You did 5 films for Universal, and
interesting.
George Brent and Bette Davis, you knew they would be in those films, and
interesting.
That was a big draw, I think, because these people were. I think now we have so many famous actors, actresses, celebrities in general that it sort of waters down their importance. But at the time, you know, these
right,
with less films and, you know, going to the cinema at the time, especially after, you know, right after the end of the Second World War, being able to go back into that sort of like normal life, and, you know, being free to go to the cinema and enjoy it and not see, you know, horrendous newsreels of what's going on in France or, you know, the middle of the Pacific, and, you know, the horrors of Iwo Jima and that. And whereas now, like you say, with Brad Pitt, he's in 6-7 films a year sometimes, and it makes it less of an event, I think, for the movie going public. Whereas at the time, I think these people were seen as, you know, these great celebrities that people did look up to, and they had their favourite actors and actresses, and would follow them more fervently. Whereas today, as Connor says, you know, they're social media and everything. Are any of them going to even be remembered in 30, 40 years?
We've kind of hit on a number of, like, we've kind of talked about certain scenes. We haven't given it too much coherence. I don't know if, Connor, you had any interesting insights into the way the movie's filmed, or the lighting with the thunder and lightning.
That whole scene leading up to her walking to the house, how the darkness of the storm with Brett Lee shows up, and just the flashes of lightning creating all the silhouettes of the trees, and then the killer, and then the contrast of that with the glistening rain jackets. Yeah, for sure. That scene was pretty phenomenal. And then it would like kind of back out, and you'd see the gothic kind of Victorian style house, and just created this, I don't know, this menacing, beautiful scene of a storm. right, yeah. And that, so basically, or to kind of focus in a bit on the entirety of the movie. So that scene where the storm kind of erupts almost randomly, it seems. I mean, it's alluded to as you pointed out. So it's not. I don't want to say abrupt. Like, it just, the way it kind of hard cuts from almost serene, nice nature to just like a storm. It's a little. I was a little jarred by that. But as soon as Helen runs into the house from the storm, and that's when you kind of see the killer trying to, you know, he's kind of lurking behind one of the trees in the shadows. He seems to almost go for her right then and there too. He comes out for a second, and then
you think
she drops the key.
Builds that tension for just that moment. Then once she doesn't even know that he's there. She's just kind of trying to get into the house because she's getting drenched. And people in this movie, when they go out in the, like, they made everybody just sopping wet whenever they came back from, you know, like, it looked miserable, frankly. Like, when people would just be riding like their horse-drawn carriages, I'm like, you know, just through the rain, it's like they even have like a little wagon covering their head, and they're still just soaked. Like, it just looks like a miserable place. But she runs into the house, and as soon as she gets in the house, you pretty much are in that home for the rest of the film. So like the bulk of the film, or most of it, just takes place in this mansion.
And I think as Connor says, that transitory scene as she comes from the village through the woods into the house as well, reflected in the soundtrack when she's first dropped off by the doctor. It's quite a light sylvan score reflecting kind of this nice woodland, and it slows down and gets more sinister. And then there's that beautiful little bit where she runs the stick along the fence.
Yeah. Again, that part's great.
Blurring the lines between the soundtrack and the film, but just that beautiful rhythmic ding 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 ding, that helps build the tension as she's approaching this house. Again,
the composition of that shot was pretty great too.
As Connor says, it's such a brilliantly composed shot, both visually and musically. And then, as you're saying, you've got that lurking figure in the oilskin, and as you say, you think immediately, oh god, he's going to kill her. It does seem that the intent is there, isn't it, to just kill her immediately, even though the killer's just killed the girl in the inn or the hotel or wherever it is they've been watching the film. Like, he just simply can't get enough. And I think It's a brilliant way of making it look so compulsive for this killer. He's just killed, but he's straight out into the rainstorm. He's sinister cloak like oilskin, stalking another defective human as he sees them.
Yes.
And then shortly after, the next scene that I really enjoyed is when Helen's walking up the stairs, and you think she's walking like towards the camera, but it ends up being the mirror.
Right.
And she's kind of like looking at herself in the mirror, and all that. And then the camera kind of moves up the stairs, and you see these archways and the railing, and their shadows casted on the floor.
Yeah, a lot of mirrors used throughout the film. There's another one where they go to the kitchen past that floor-to-ceiling mirror, and you get the reflection of them in the mirror and then the shadow on the wall as they walk back to the kitchen a couple of times. And very clever use of the mirrors throughout. There seem to be a lot of mirrors in the house as well, don't there? I think put there for these, little camera, not tricks, but the nuanced use of the reflections, as you say, because it completely foxes you. And sows that seed in your mind that what you're seeing might not be exactly what's going on. You might be viewing a reflection of actuality, and it helps sort of wrong foot you a bit and make the ground you're standing on as a viewer a little less unsure as to what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, then I thought it was how they get to the killer's feet while she's looking at herself in the mirror, and then they kind of do like
again. That tracking shot. Yeah.
And then like her mouth's all like blurred out, like the murderer's like, oh, that's her ailment. She's gonna be my next victim.
Right.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that. Do you call that a tracking shot or whatever, where it kind of like the camera like pans on like a dolly shot, I guess, where it kind of like it slowly kind of creeps along the hallway, then you see his feet kind of standing there, and like you don't really notice it until he starts walking out seemingly. I really like that shot. I thought that was cool, and I thought that was kind of funny too, because you notice, but like when that scene, she's kind of just standing in front of the mirror looking at herself, and when like the camera, you can see the reflection, but then when it zooms back to kind of more the killer's perspective on like that loft, that balcony, it seems like the mirror just kind of turns into like a painting of some sort, because like the reflection and the camera moves. Like the reflection doesn't move in the mirror. It looks like it just kind of became like a static image.
That was probably their way of hiding the camera. I could see it. Like they're probably just like, but we really want this shot, but every angle we go at, you can still see the camera in the background. So
interesting. Okay, see, that's what I was like, that's a little obvious to be like a goof, but that would make sense. Yeah, if they're trying to track it, you would see the person in the background just like moving the camera. That makes a lot more sense.
Nowadays, they'd probably just throw a green screen on the mirror and kind of just layer a video over it, but.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting though. Yeah, that I just thought that was a bit of a funny, or that moment. I was kind of like, I wonder what the hell happened there. Like it didn't fool me.
Well, I really loved all the scenes with the spiral staircase, with the movies, named after. But just how dark it was in there, and had that noir feel of just the dark shadows and just the faint little shafts of light lighting the characters' faces, and then into the attic. I loved all that, where she has just the candle in her hand, and just the flickering of light on her face. That was definitely a talented cinematographer. His name's Nicholas Musaraga?
I have trouble with that surname as well. But yeah, I think that's it. And like you say, you're very, very skilled by just looking at his CV, his back catalogue of the films he's made.
It just goes and goes and goes. And then also in the cellar scene, I really enjoyed the part where the guy kills... what's the character's name?
Blanche?
When he kills her, and he kind of like throws her into the shadows, and you just see her hands like out of the shadows, kind of gripping at the walls.
Yeah, it almost seems like in each scene, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in each scene where the murder happens, you don't really ever see him physically doing it. You just kind of see like the hands that kind of... like, like they're kind of getting like that rigor mortis of like they're trying to resist almost. Like, I mean, that even happens in the very opening, like the first kill, right? Where the lady, she's kind of putting her nightgown on, and as the nightgown's over her eyes and she can't see the killer, and she's putting her hands up through the armhole, that's when he strikes, and you just see her hands kind of lock up, and you know that she just got murdered. And that also happens with Blanche, like she kind of gets pushed into the shadow, and you just see her arms kind of sprawl out from the darkness for that brief second, and then I thought, I was like, man, I don't think you can strangle somebody to death that quick. But that whole bit, and then was there? I'm trying to think. There's the Blanche, and then I guess, were there any other? Was there another? There weren't any other murders throughout, were there? Or
I think it was just those two, like, on screen.
It was just those two.
Yeah, they're the on-screen ones. There's that bit where Mrs. Oates, the cleaner.
The lush, right? She loves her brandy. That shit was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, Elsa Lanchester, a very well-known actress of her time, as was Rhonda Fleming, who played Blanche. And she says, there was the girl with the scar, and then the simple-minded one, and then she says the cripple at the hotel. And then the constable picks up on that as well, doesn't he, when he's talking to Professor Warren. So you get this hint that there has been a spate of murder.
Yeah, I actually liked kind of talking about the characters. Like, each character in this film also has, like, kind of their own personality to distinguish them. Like, they're all, like Miss Oates, the way she's, like I described her as a lush, and, she sneaks a bottle of brandy and she thinks she kind of tricks Professor Warren because she's like, I need and like she throws the candle. I thought it was kind of funny just the way she acted. Like, she kind of just blew the candle out and just threw it, and she's like, I seem to have dropped it, and then she grabs the bottle of brandy while he's looking for it. I'm like, you really think that guy believes that you just like accidentally? I don't know, like, I just thought it was kind of funny, like how she thought she was being sly, but it was so obvious at the same time. And then what Blanche is about to leave the house in another scene when she's getting ready to leave with Helen, and she just kind of peeks out and sees that she's like looking for something in the kitchen, and then she just kind of like looks at her and then kind of like just hides behind the door. Like, I don't know, they're just like these cute little moments that she has where she's just, I don't know, like, or she just takes the bottle of brandy, pours herself a glass, takes a shot, and just like looks at the bottle again. She's like, I'll take an, and then she just like takes another shot, like no words, but like she's just pounding them. And then like near the end when she's passed out, you see like there's only like a third of the bottle left. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's only been like an hour throughout the film, you've almost like drank an entire bottle. Like, it's I don't know, I thought it was funny. I really enjoyed that, those little touches throughout.
She goes hard.
Exactly. And Mr. Oates as well, a rounded character, and that actor's Rhys Williams. He comes in and out at some very odd times, doesn't he? Without any real really explanation as to where he's been.
He kind of gets pushed out when he's requested to go get ether, and then you don't really see him in the rest of the film. But I thought there's that one funny line, like he kind of had, like, there were a couple good lines, like where he taught. I thought it was interesting. The one I enjoyed that I was kind of like, oh, that's a good explanation, when they were talking about the murders, and he was like, oh, just think about the probability of it. It's like you always open the paper and it's like, it's never you, it's never me, and like every day you open the paper and there's a murder. He's like, oh yeah, it's like, strength and numbers, what have you. And then he had that one savage line where he was like talking about that Nurse Barker, the one who's rebuked by Mrs. Warren, who's always sitting upstairs but is never allowed to go in the room because she just has a tiff with her. And he's just like, yeah, sometimes I think she's a man. And he just like has these lines, and then she's already standing in the doorway, and everybody realizes it at almost the exact same time that she heard the entire thing, and everybody's just like, oh shit, like that. Like, and I was just like, I don't know, I just thought it was funny, like, not that it, just the way, I just enjoyed just like how he was just so frank about it, and then everybody's like, oh shit, like their sphincters clenched as soon as they realized they slipped up.
Yeah, exactly. And as Connor's saying with the scene with the dropped candle in the wine cellar, brilliant bit of misdirection on the director's part, with all the shadows collecting and the score builds, and you think something's going to happen.
Yes.
But then it's another red herring, because nothing happens at all. But Mrs. Oates then passes on the candle trick to Helen when she's bragging about how she's got the bottles of brandy. And then when Helen herself's down the cellar with, as we think, the killer Stephen, she uses the very same trick in able to lure him into the room so she can lock him in.
Right. I just find it so interesting too, just like how dependent they are on, like, they were looking for the she throws the candle, and I guess it's just the way the film is lit, because like, you can see the other end of the hallway, kind of where the spiral staircase leads up. I'm like, screw the candle, just walk toward the light. Like, I'm like, just go walk over there. But I guess in some sense maybe you're supposed to, the lighting kind of shows it, but maybe in the world of the film it's so dark you really can't see anything. Yeah, but like I'm like just walk down the hallway, it's not a big deal, But are there any other specific scenes that you guys want to talk about? I mean, I think we've got it.
Kind of the ending scene where Mrs. Badass Ethel Barrymore
Yeah.
Just comes in and fucking shoots Mr. Warren or Professor
Yeah,
Warren.
she's just standing. Yeah. And I thought that was a pretty powerful or pretty awesome scene because, you know, she's bedridden the entire film. And you don't even really see her walk.
No, you just
see
think
her
she's
standing
like,
there.
can't do anything.
Right. And then at the very end, she's just like standing on the stairwell with her pistol, and she just has like that determined look on her face, like she's like, I'm gonna fuck this guy up. She just looks so pissed.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah,
and I think we've seen how disappointed she is with Stephen. She even alludes to every time Stephen comes back, bad things happen, and again he's basically
Stephen.
Yeah, sending you down the wrong alley, isn't it? And then she realises it's not actually Stephen who's been killing the girls. And like I say, all of a sudden she's this imposing, powerful figure at the top of the stairs, and like you say, he's going down, she's just going to shoot him. And I think that some of that reflects the disappointment that it is actually the professor who's the killer and not the ne'er-do-well Stephen, who they're alluding he's been obviously active in the services in some role during the Second World War, haven't they? And at that time, nothing untoward's happened in the local area. Again, he's selling you another red herring as to who the perpetrator is.
Yeah. On my first watch of this, I thought, man, they're trying really hard to like. It almost seemed a little too on the nose to me on first watch that they were trying to make Stephen the murderer, because like there were just so many scenes where it just seemed like they were so intentionally trying to mislead you. But it definitely got more subtle as I watched it more, which is interesting.
And one of the very subtle things that you mentioned earlier, the use of the theremin. It's only been used in a few films at that time, but that itself is a sort of leitmotif to the murder and the suspense, but it's so subtly done. Like I say, you have to watch the film a few times before you even pick up, like, hang on, the theremin's coming in again.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the very few trustworthy signposts, as it were, through the film as to what's actually going in is that use of the theremin, which at the time was a pretty new invention and hadn't been heard of before. I mean, now it's a pretty standardised instrument for ghosts, hauntings in a lot of film, but at the time it was more cutting-edge electronic instrument because somebody making noise without touching the instrument was something magical in itself.
Is that the one device where it kind of has like that rod sticking out and you put your hand near it or whatever and it kind of changes? I've seen people use that like in ambient shows before, and I was like, man, that's a really cool instrument. Just like the way, like how close you get to it, and like I don't know if it has anything to do with like if your hand is open or closed, but I found that really interesting. I didn't realize that was the device that they were using to kind of create those. Was that what they were using to create more of those like horror textures or more like those little soundscapes? Is that the instrument?
Yeah, that's it. Because other than that, it's an orchestral score, isn't it? It's standard string instruments and what you'd find with any orchestra, but then with just this very early use of the electronic music, and would have been very unusual. I would think a lot of people wouldn't have even heard it before. For us to imagine sitting in the cinema and not knowing what's making that sound. It would have made the film even more powerful when people were sitting there watching.
Yeah, they're like, what is that strange, bizarre sound?
Yeah, I almost equate that with like nowadays I almost equate that with just like Halloween or something like that. So when I heard that, I was like, oh man, this is I really like that.
I love that ambience throughout the entire film too. I would say 75% of the film you always hear wind and rain in the background, and it kind of made up this whole cool air.
Yeah, it really immerses. It really cements you kind of in the home with them, and it makes it. Like, I don't want to say it made me feel claustrophobic, but it made me feel like it was like the world or this home was lived in. And I don't know, like there was something comforting about it. Like even though like the decorations were like the Victorian ornate design and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know, I just felt like comfortable like seeing all the sets and all the stuff they were using, like at least on like the ground floor and the second floor where Miss Warren was residing. Yeah, like it just felt lived in.
Like you're almost escaping the storm, and you know.
You're sheltering there as well. As we touched on with Onibaba, with the wind in the Suzuki grasses, like you say, it embeds you in that house, and as Con says, like you are taking shelter in there.
It almost reminds me of the film that actually kind of took place around the same time, Key Largo, which you know, they're inside the house the whole time, escaping from a storm. I think that even had a Barrymore in it too.
Connor's right, and I think as well with both films a socio-political sign of the times. The Second World War had just finished and Americans happy to be back at home and comfortable with the threat outside, and as the same with the anti-communist propaganda that was prevalent in society in general at the time on both sides of the Atlantic. Over here it wasn't any different with regards to the films, but the storm may be epitomising this chaotic, threatening power from outside, which to a lot of everyday people in America and the UK, that's what communists represented, didn't it? This horrific, terrifying force from the unknown, which went completely against the grain of how they believed the very essence of society should be. And this house being a little bastion of settled American life, and you've still got the striations of society there, haven't you? You've got the matriarchal head of the house, and then the staff, and then the more independent characters such as Helen, who are still there. So there's a lot of social commentary going on in the makeup of the film as well, I think. Yeah,
for sure. And that's something that I didn't even really pick up on as much. I mean, that's really illuminating to hear all that information, all those insights. It makes me think about the film a lot more. It gives it a lot of just a really interesting angle. But yeah, I thought the motivation of Professor Warren was pretty bleak when he was just talking to Helen. Like, he kind of makes that, that off-color remark to her, and like she kind of realizes that he's the murderer, and like he spills everything out. It's just like, oh yeah, I just want to take the weaker, almost like a subspecies. Like, I just want to like take them out essentially. And I was like, man, that is like a really, like the motivation. Like there wasn't even much of a. Yeah, that's the vibe I got. There was really no good motivation. And then he's just like, oh, Blanche, I killed her because I loved her and she didn't love me, so she had to die. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, Jesus Christ, like, this guy's off his fucking rocker. Like, he just like justified it in such a, I don't know, like it just seemed like such an insane justification, and it kind of solidified it for me. I'm like, oh man, this guy is fucked up.
Yeah, and it's such a brilliant performance, isn't it, by George Brent? Because he's so matter of fact and so flat, and like you say, you just realise he's completely gone. This is a monster. True evil is very bland and very everyday, isn't it? And he epitomises that, because of all the characters, he should be the one that embraces and encourages difference, because he's by far and away, apart from maybe his stepmother, the most educated person in the entire film. He's a professor of something, which arguably means he holds a chair at a university, and yet the undercurrent is this completely amoral, merciless killer. And Blanche, no need to kill her at all, other than that she wasn't interested in romantically. So it doesn't even fit with his usual modus operandi of killing people. He perceives as being different and not fitting in.
I mean, there's nothing obvious with her. I mean, she's kind of is going about her day, or she's kind of going about her job, and she's just like miserable living there, so she just wants to leave. And he kind of goes against his own rationale for whatever reason.
I think they're showing at that point he's completely lost his humanity there, hasn't he? And any minor reason, if she hadn't shot him at the end, he's probably going to kill everyone in that house.
Yeah, he got a little too lustful with that one murder, and he just started kind of going crazy. And I guess maybe it had something to do too with, because since the whole film takes place literally throughout that evening, what I thought was kind of funny, and Stephen, the younger brother, he kind of he's a bit of a smart ass throughout the movie. He kind of drops some lines where you're just like, man, this guy just does not give a single shit about anything. He's just very wry about the way he talks. But the whole house, it seems like there's like a mass exodus. Like Nurse Barker, the one that Miss Warren rebukes, she leaves, and then Mr. Oates, he's off for a number of hours, and then Blanche wants to leave and Helen wants to leave, and it seems like everybody's just kind of vacating the estate all within a couple hours. Yeah. And it seems like Professor Warren's almost desperate or anything like that, but it seems like that's kind of like his last-ditch effort to really, do what he wants to do.
Completely losing control.
Yeah.
It's hinted at with the return of Stephen as well, I think, in that it's been quite a sedate household that he sees he's been in control of, and then his arguably more heroic stepbrother comes back from the war. He's more dashing, perceived as being a bit more of a ladies' man than the professor as well, and I think there's that jealousy over Blanche there as well.
Because exactly. Yeah, he's trying to woo Blanche. He takes her into town or whatever for the day, or the day before, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of rubbed Professor Warren the wrong way.
Exactly. Even though Blanche isn't interested at all in him.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of like threat to his alpha male status, I suppose, and maybe again inferred that the professor's not been away with the armed forces, and obviously at the time when the people who had been with the armed forces came back from the horrific conflict in Europe and across the Pacific into Japan, and they were sort of lionised as heroes, and the same in this country, and arguably rightly so. These people have been fighting probably the most modern epitome of evil that we've ever faced as a modern world, whereas he's a more bookish, academic, sedate character, isn't he? And generally speaking, in films, professors and academics of this nature are either experts who people turn to, or they're the bad guys, aren't they, and the mad professors. And he kind of has one foot in both camps, doesn't he? But it's been a very nice, comfortable life for him, and I think perceives that he has control over all these women, because it's a very female-dominated household. I know we've got the constable pops in a few times and Dr. Parry, but rewind it to before Stephen comes back and the murders start. There was no reason for the constable to turn up. Arguably, Dr. Parry's also been away with war, so he's been the only man with all these women who are subordinate to him, and then all of a sudden it's all changed, and I think that as well, as he's spiralling out of control and losing control of this world he's built around, so he can.
Well, there you go. I mean, just not to sound cheesy, but like the way you just described that, I don't know if there's any connection between that and kind of like when you said spiral. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense, like the spiral staircase in a sense. Like it seems like that's kind of like there's some sort of rhyme going on there. Maybe I don't know, maybe it's like reading a bit too deeply into it, but based on how you described that makes sense, kind of like the spiraling, the spiral staircase
maybe, but we're both suffering from the same delusion as well, because I've always seen that spiral staircase going down into the darkness as a sort of analogue, a metaphor for the mental health of the people, and going down into the darkness, down this spiral. And even more recently, Nine Inch Nails' seminal album, The Downward Spiral, which is all about a descent into mental health problems and violence. He touches on the Tate murders, doesn't he, in that album. So I think that the spiral and the downwards nature of it has long been seen as a sort of like analogue for people becoming ill or mentally ill, or things becoming horrific. So I don't think it's anything other than a very conscious decision to have that spiral staircase.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, it's like, what's the point of the staircase?
And as Connor says, the Victorian building, they put a lot of effort into the architecture that was seen. But the architecture that the staff and the behind the closed doors bit, which the cellar would be, they wouldn't have gone to all that time and effort to have an ornate iron spiral staircase. It'd probably just been a standard wooden staircase down for the staff to go up and down. But no, we've got this beautifully intricate spiral staircase descending, and you go down, it gets more shadowy, and every time they go down there, the score tightens up and becomes more tense, and the tension's built as you go down into the cellar, isn't it? And when Blanche is after a suitcase, when she's finally thought, well, fuck all, I'm off, I'm leaving, and the moment her foot hits that staircase that she's a goner somehow, don't you? She's not going to be coming back up again.
Well, do we have any other closing thoughts or anything else we think we should discuss? We spoiled the end of the film, obviously, but I guess that there are a lot of nice moments and some really cool bits throughout that we didn't really touch on.
Helen mute. We didn't talk about that, but I think that'd be kind of cool just to leave out. I don't know.
I think one thing we didn't touch on, but with Helen, is the bit where she's trying to attract the attention of the constable when the storm's hit its height. She's banging on the windows and she's trying to get his attention. And
he's kind of a dolt, isn't he? I mean, when like that's going on, like he kind of like looks, he's like, oh, what the hell is that? And he's like, screw it, and he just like gets back in the wagon, and like just
he sees
zips off.
The gate banging, doesn't he?
Professor Warren's just like, oh, there's nothing wrong, like it's okay, and he's like, okay,
yeah,
see you later.
And he's such a timid character too. I want to try and bring this up, but I just love the dog in this movie too.
He's awesome.
Yeah, the dog is just chilling, just kind of like, what kind of dog is that again?
Like some type of bulldog, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
English bulldog?
Yeah, I think he's a British bulldog. Yeah.
Yeah, just the way he, like, the constable's about to leave and the dog's just like sitting right in front of the door, and he's too like timid to go up to the door and leave, so he asks the professor to like call the dog away or whatever. And I was like, man, what? He's just like a little pussy. He's just like such a And I'm like, it's a bulldog.
Yeah.
And he kind of appears. That dog appears throughout a handful of scenes. I thought it was pretty awesome, honestly. And they don't even
just innocent and chill.
Yeah, and getting the blame for a lot of things. All he ever does is lie about.
Yeah.
But and I think as well with the leaving of the constable, and generally how the constable is painted once we've ascertained that he's not really a suspect. As you say, he's just a little bit of a dog. But I think as well there, given the time the film came out, it's maybe a little message of how society and order has been turned on its head, by the rise of Nazism in Germany, leading to the most horrific conflict the world's ever seen. And prior to that, people, had a lot of belief in the order of society and how everything is right and supported. As you say, he's a bit of a half-wit for a constable.
It seems to be that way, or maybe he's just either half-wit or he's just, he's like really naive. I don't know.
Yeah, the first half of the film, as I was saying earlier, you don't really know whether he's putting it on to hide something, because he's always around and about when the murder's going on. But then by the end of it, when you've ascertained, actually, no, he is just a half-wit. And then he just leaves, doesn't he? So I don't know.
Yeah, he's just like, He's just like, I know something. You would think he knows something strange is going on in the house, and he just just trots away. He's like,
I'm off. I'll see you later. But I think they might be saying that after the Second World War, especially because this film was made right at the end of the Second World War and released shortly after that. And it's hard for us to put ourselves in that position, but you imagine that day waking up and reading about the concentration camps and seeing the photographs. I mean, Dimbleby, who's a famous broadcaster here, and he was one of the first journalists at Belsen, and listening to him talking about how it changed his life, and he was there, and how he had to report it when he couldn't believe it himself, and how everyone's faith in law and order and in people following the rules was just completely shredded and chucked to the winds. Yeah. So I don't know if the fact that the constable is portrayed as basically a powerless idiot who did have trouble solving a murder if there were only two people in the room and one of them was dead, wouldn't he?
And that's actually an interesting point to bring up, huh? So you've added a whole lot of interesting depth to this, or at least a lot of things to mull over on another viewing, I think.
Maybe I overthink things. There is always that as well, but
no, there's always that. But that's what makes talking about films like that so much more fun, because that historical context, I probably would not have been able to go nearly as deep as you have on that stuff. I think that's really interesting to kind of bring that into the mix. It makes for an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's also reflective of the fact that there was such a highly skilled, highly responsible and highly experienced crew that were making this film, from the director and even the partnership between Muzaraska, I hope I've got his name wrong, the cinematographer and
hey, join the club, man.
Exactly. We never seem to pick ones who have easy names, do we? And
nope.
The composer Webb, because they'd worked on a lot of films together before in the 40s. The Cat People, Curse of the Cat People, two films which hopefully we'll be able to discuss in the future, because again, great favourites from my childhood, The Cat People and Curse of the Cat People, and then Webb went on famously to score The Body Snatchers as well.
Yes,
which came out just before The Spiral Staircase. Again, another great film, but it shows how quickly that he was composing these, and must have been working on more than one film at any given time, and the professionalism of someone to be able to do that and have the soundtracks to fit perfectly with the films, because they're very different topics, subject matters, the two films. And when you look at the staff and the crew that were making it, they knew their jobs inside out. These weren't novices or naive. These were professionals who all came together and put everything into it and really delivered, I think, on every aspect of the film.
Yeah, it's a very tight and very well paced too. I think it does not there's no real excess here. I mean, the whole thing kind of beginning, middle, end, it kind of just goes through everything very nicely. And by the end, it breezes by, at least on the the subsequent viewings. I was just like, man, it already is over. It just seems to kind of just blend so well. and just like the character interactions and the callbacks or call for, just like the way they, like things just all kind of mesh together. It comes together really nicely.
One of those few films as well that you could watch without even listening to the dialogue. Or I could quite happily pop a CD on and just visually enjoy the film. As Connor was saying, every scene is so well thought out with regards to the camera angles and the lighting, and Connor probably get a bit more out of it than I would, because he's so much more versed in what's actually going on behind the camera with the lights. But just visually, it's such a beautiful film to watch, and the bit with the railings and the bit with her coming down the stairs with the shadows of the trees, you just watch them over and over again because they're such perfect epitomes, so perfectly captured. Right.
Well, shoot, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I don't know if Connor's ever heard of this prior. Frankly, I'm glad that you're able to do these conversations with us, man, because I'm learning so much more about cinema through all these. Like, there's so many interesting films to talk about, and it's always nice to be able to kind of just go back to these more obscure films, or just some of the films that just may not be talked about as much.
Well, that's the end of this episode. From Ryan, Connor and myself, thanks a lot for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you've got any thoughts or any queries, please get in contact, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Take care.